What's up, everybody? Welcome back. We are here with some more NFL DFS picks and lineup advice for DraftKings and FanDuel. This time for the single game showdown slate on Thursday Night Football here in Week 7. It's the Cincinnati Bengals and the Pittsburgh Steelers. In this video, we will discuss the injuries that impact tonight's game. We will look at low risk lineup construction tips and core plays for DraftKings and FanDuel. And then we will give you some insight into the value plays and some strategies and tips and picks for how to win the biggest prizes in DFS. Welcome, I'm Brian Jester, co-founder here at Occupy Fantasy, single game $1 million winner. Let's jump into it and let's look at the visiting Pittsburgh Steelers tonight. They will be without, once again, their number 2 wide receiver, Calvin Austin. He missed last week's game with that shoulder injury. He'll miss tonight's game as well, did not practice this week. If we look at the routes run in last week's game, the most recent game for Pittsburgh, it was DK Metcalf, 28. It was tight end Jonnu Smith with 22. Other tight end Darnell Washington ran 19 routes. He was the number 3 route runner for Pittsburgh last week. Scotty Miller ran 15 routes. Pat Freiermuth, yes, another tight end, ran 14 routes. Roman Wilson ran 8. Ben Skowronek ran 4. And Keyshawn Williams ran 1 route. So lots of tight end usage. Again, it's a one-game sample. Not sure much changes here on a short week. We know Arthur Smith loves his tight ends. So expect a lot of 2 tight end, 3 tight end sets once again tonight for Pittsburgh with Roman Wilson, Scotty Miller, Ben Skowronek mixing in behind DK Metcalf. Monitor the injury reports and pregame inactives as well for a defensive player for Pittsburgh. Their starting safety, Deshaun Elliott, is officially questionable. He was added to the injury report yesterday with a personal matter, did not travel with the team. Obviously, he can still travel today, a short flight from Pittsburgh to Cincinnati. But if he is out, that's a downgrade to Pittsburgh's passing defense, an upgrade to Cincinnati's passing offense. We may know that with the report throughout the day, but we'll know for sure by 6:50 p.m. Eastern when Pittsburgh turns in their inactives list. Now, moving on to Cincinnati. Their tight end, Mike Gesicki, is out, placed on injured reserve with a pec injury. He got injured just 2 snaps into that game last week against Green Bay. Where's Mike Gesicki? He's down here, 2,600. Yes, he is. So Mike Gesicki was injured, and because he was injured basically immediately, we have a full game sample of what to look for. In last week's game, Noah Fant ran 24 routes. Tanner Hudson ran 16. Drew Sample ran 11. However, Tanner Hudson, also injured in that game, suffered a concussion. He did not practice this week. He will be out. So that leaves Noah Fant and Drew Sample with the primary workload tonight for Cincinnati at the tight end position. Now, they also have Cam Grandy. Let's put in Drew Sample really quickly. They also have Cam Grandy, who's the number 4 tight end on the roster. He will now be the number 3 tight end. Can't imagine he factors in much. I'm sure he'll see some playing time given how many tight ends they've rotated this year. But expect Fant and Sample to see elevated snap counts and route shares tonight compared to previous weeks. Also, for Cincinnati, probably the most impactful injury in this entire game. Their star pass rusher, Trey Hendrickson, on defense is likely going to be out. He's officially questionable, did not practice in any capacity this week, left last week's game early with that hip injury. And Ian Rappaport, national reporter this morning, said that not a great chance that Hendrickson plays. He's going to try, but it's more of a long shot. So that would be a big upgrade to Pittsburgh's offense if Hendrickson is indeed out for tonight. Let's monitor reports throughout the day. Also, it sounds like Cincinnati will get back their opening day starting left guard Lucas Patrick from injured reserve. That would certainly be an upgrade to their offensive line and their offense in general. Chase Brown, any offensive line help that he wants to get, I'm sure he'll happily welcome, as will the newcomer Joe Flacco at quarterback. We'll know that for sure by 4 p.m. Eastern because they will have to activate him from injured reserve. All right, moving on to low-risk contests and DFS, 50-50s, double-ups, head-to-heads, where you just have to beat half the field to double your money. You know the strategy by now if you've been watching our videos. We try to lock up all the scoring by playing both quarterbacks, both running backs. A little tricky tonight for 2 reasons. One, we have a stud receiver in Jamar Chase, who is always difficult to leave out, even though he is extremely expensive tonight, especially on DraftKings. And then both backfields are split. Jaylen Warren splitting with Kenneth Gainwell. Chase Brown splitting a little more probably than people anticipated with Samaje Perine recently in the last couple of games. But they're still the lead backs for their team. They both catch passes. They're still probably guys that we want to get in. So if we tried the core 4 route of Aaron Rodgers, favored quarterback in this game, 5.5-point road favorites, Joe Flacco, Jaylen Warren, Chase Brown, 47.50 left per player. We could easily play someone like the favorite kicker in Chris Boswell or Steelers defense, and then go with a tight end that's going to play a lot in Jonnu Smith or Noah Fant. That seems like a really good route to go. If we tried to play an obvious value in Darnell Washington, 7,500, that doesn't leave us much. In fact, it doesn't leave us anything to upgrade to. If we tried to switch Rodgers and Warren, let's see how this looks. Favored running back. And again, it's not like Aaron Rodgers is going to project for a ton of volume anyways, not a must-play quarterback in a showdown format. But if we played Warren at captain and Rodgers, 82, that still doesn't get us anything. So I think playing the core four with two mid-range guys seems like the way to go tonight. Now, if you wanted to get Jamar Chase in, you would probably need Darnell Washington. And because Chase is so expensive, he doesn't work that well in the captain spot. And you'd have to choose between Chase Brown and Jaylen Warren. Now, Warren has been more productive. They are the favorite in this game. You probably want to go with Warren over Chase Brown if making that decision. So let's go Aaron Rodgers at captain. See how this looks. Jamar Chase flex. Jaylen Warren flex. Darnell Washington, the favored punt of this game. Again, you don't get much with it. Let's try the Jaylen Warren captain route and see how this looks. 4,200. And now we can play Jonnu Smith or Noah Fant. That's probably the way you want to go. So really you're making the decision on Darnell Washington, Jamar Chase versus Chase Brown and Chris Boswell. Very close decision tonight. Now on FanDuel, it's a little more obvious to play the 4 quarterback and running back route with the half-point PPR scoring. But Chase isn't as expensive over here. $13,200, just $600 more expensive than Aaron Rodgers. So I can understand if you want to play Jamar Chase tonight in low-risk contests. This core 4, and this is with Jaylen Warren MVP, leaves $5,900 left per player. Again, nothing crazy. Let's try this. Kicker and Noah Fant. That's a really good way to go if we decide to go. And if you play Jamar Chase, you could just have to downgrade your 6th position. It's really not that big of a difference. But playing the core 4 looks a little bit better over on FanDuel. And I think tonight I might play Jamar Chase in low risk on DraftKings and not play him in low risk on FanDuel. All right, moving on to high risk contests, leagues, GPPs, satellites. Got to beat a lot of people to win a lot of money. Let's talk about those angles. And again, even if you're not playing DFS, you can use a lot of things we talk about in this video to make your bets, your pick'em slips, whatever it may be. So let's get the water break sip in, and then we will talk about the high risk section for tonight. All right, hydrated, ready to go. We have one underperforming wide receiver tonight. Great week last week for the underperforming wide receivers. Ted McMillan caught 2 touchdowns. Hollywood Brown caught 2 touchdowns. Xavier Worthy caught a touchdown. Devontae Adams should have had 2 touchdowns. Didn't even have 1. That's why he's on the underperforming wide receiver list. Pretty banner week for underperforming wide receivers last week. T. Higgins joins the list this week, has vastly underperformed his expectations. And again, how we look at this is targets, the number of targets, where those targets occur on the field, how deep downfield those targets are. And you can turn that into how many points a player should have scored based on that usage. You compare that to their actual fantasy points, and you get an underperforming wide receiver. Generally, these guys blow up in the next week or two if that usage continues. We also have another check mark for T. Higgins in the fact that his usage continued when Joe Flacco came over last week in that trade. And Joe Flacco is generally an upgrade over Jake Browning as well. So 2 checkpoints for T. Higgins to continue his usage, which is a number 1 indicator that we look for if we want to continue to play an underperforming wide receiver. And T. Higgins is massively overpriced on DraftKings. I don't know who made this pricing or why, but he's the 3rd most expensive player, and he's averaging 8 fantasy points per game this year. No one's really going to play him. He might get up to 20% on DraftKings overall, but we expect him to be 3% in the captain on DraftKings, 1% at MVP on FanDuel. And yes, he's more affordably priced at $8,600 on FanDuel, but still, based on his points per game, his projection, no one's going to want to play an MVP. We will gladly always play underperforming wide receivers, especially when they are studs at MVP at lowered ownership in showdown contests. It's a print fest. Is that guarantee it's going to happen tonight? Obviously not. But over the long haul, you play underperforming stud wide receivers at MVP and captain, you're going to make money. All right. Now let's talk about all the values on this slate and how we can mix and match them into our lineups, whether they're popular or not. And again, you're filling out the last couple spots in your lineup and you're looking, do I need popular players? Is the rest of my lineup pretty differentiated? Do I want safer floors? Or am I pretty chalky in the rest of my lineup and I need to play some lower owned guys to get different in GPPs? So that's where we look at values here in high risk contests. So if we start at Samaje Perine and below, right? We have kickers and defensive Steelers, Boswell, McPherson. Samaje Perine, 4,400. We have him low owned on DraftKings, but not on FanDuel. If you look at Samaje Perine's price on FanDuel, just 3,200. He'll be relatively popular over here, 20 to 30% projected ownership from us. But an elevated price tag of 4,400 on DraftKings, even with the PPR scoring, not going to be that popular. You look at the snaps, the last two games, it's been 55%, 45% in favor of Chase Brown. That's a stark difference from the 70% that we had seen in the previous weeks from Chase Brown. Now, Chase Brown has certainly outtouched him 26-14 in these last two games, but 14 touches, opportunities for Samaje Perine, not bad. And again, if he gets lucky and scores a touchdown or catches more passes in 2-minute drills than expected, could be an option to outscore some of these other guys in his price range. Now, right below him, both Jonnu Smith and Noah Fant, who we discussed in the usage and injury section, as well as the low risk section, both these guys will be popular. Fant obviously gets the elevated role tonight with Mike Gesicki out and Tanner Hudson out. Jonnu Smith, Arthur Smith loves him from Jonnu Smith. He's seen at least 3 targets in every game this year. So expect 3 to 6 targets from Jonnu Smith, which is a solid floor. Solid floors for both Smith and Noah Fant, which is why they're expected to be more popular than Samaje Perine. Talked about Andre Josivas briefly in the injury section. Maybe they go more 3 wide receiver sets tonight without Mike Gesicki and Tanner Hudson. And Josivas had a pretty poor game last week. Had 4 targets. I think the 3 misses were all drops. Visibly frustrated. Felt for him. Just one of those games. But we know he's a talented dude. And if he gets 4 to 5, 6 targets from Joe Flacco tonight at $2,800 and being low owned, you got to love that. You absolutely have to love that. Probably the best high upside play of this entire range. Next, we have Caleb Johnson, who is the number 3 running back. Has not looked great if you have Caleb Johnson in your best ball portfolios this year. But he's seen 20% of the snaps each of the last 2 weeks, which is a big difference from the 0% of the snaps he was seeing before that. So 20% of the snaps, can he get there? It would probably take an injury or some weird game script. So I would probably only play Caleb Johnson in Pittsburgh onslaughts, 5-1 stacks, 4-2 stacks, maybe with Pittsburgh's defense. Doesn't make much sense otherwise outside of an injury. All right, we talked about Darnell Washington, 30% plus ownership. He could even eclipse 50% in small field and high dollar GPPs tonight. And I was trying to figure out, where did these 5 targets come from? These 3 targets come from for Darnell Washington. And you look at the snap percentages for Darnell Washington, 91% of the snaps last week. That's insane for any tight end. Not just Darnell, like any tight end, 91% is crazy. 80% snaps 2 games ago. That his snap share was 37 to 46% weeks 1 through 3. So a big jump for him. His 5 targets last week was 1, a career high. 2, more targets than he saw in weeks 1 through 4. It's pretty crazy. Arthur Smith, again, who loves tight ends, was gushing about Darnell Washington just a couple of days ago. Reporters were asking him about his increased role. And he said, obviously, he's a physical specimen. If you've never seen Darnell Washington, he's like 6'7", 300 pounds. Could probably be an all-pro offensive lineman, but he plays tight end. And basically, Arthur Smith was saying that in college, high school, he was so much bigger than everyone. He could just out-physical people. And you can't necessarily do that in the NFL. Everyone's big and physical. But they said the nuances are starting to come to him. A lot of the intricacies of playing the position. And he's really flipped the switch. As a result, they're rewarding him with more playing time. So yes, it's going to be hard for him to miss out if he's 2K and gets 3 to 5 targets. But again, tight end's a volatile position. Arthur Smith is a volatile human being. He's a very safe play in low-risk contests. But in high-risk contests, if he's 40% owned, if he doesn't catch a touchdown or catch a long bomb like he did last week, caught a 36-yarder, went on a busted coverage, he's probably not going to be in the winning lineup. So Darnell Washington is mostly which type of contest you're playing. You're playing a small contest and you need a cheaper player, I don't mind playing him. You're playing a bunch of lineups in 20 max or 150 max, single entry, large field GPP, really hard to play him because a lot of lineups are going to look similar unless you leave salary on the table because he's so cheap. And let's say he scores 10 plus points and outscores everyone up to the 5K range, then I see it. Really tricky spot to deal with Darnell Washington at his elevated ownership. I'm more interested, and you can call me a fish if you want to, more interested in the receiver options in Roman Wilson and Scotty Miller. We had a great discussion in our Discord yesterday. Many Steelers fans were asking why Roman Wilson does not see in the field, was injured most of last year, his rookie year. Thought last week with Calvin Austin out, he would get an elevated role. Again, just ran 8 routes. So not sure what's going on behind the scenes with Roman Wilson, but I know there was some praise for him during training camp. I'm willing to take a risk on Roman Wilson at $1,200, especially if we need a punt. Maybe he gets a little more usage tonight, second week under his belt as a primary option. But again, Scotty Miller outsnapped him last week, ran more routes than him last week. So Scotty Miller also an option, just didn't get any targets. Roman Wilson, we have the unknown upside of a second-year player. We know what Scotty Miller is in this offense especially. So Roman Wilson would be the guy I'd prefer between these two. But Drew Sample is probably the most interesting and more logical answer here Instead, they don't want to play tight ends in Pittsburgh. They want to play tight ends in Cincinnati as well. And Drew Sample, if he gets an elevated snap count tonight, he gets a few targets at $600. And again, he's actually unpopular. We have him under 10% projected ownership on both sides because, one, you don't really need to go there. But two, if you do need to go there, people are just paying up for Darnell Washington at $2,000. Leave a little more salary. Is it that crazy that Drew Sample, the number 2 tight end, outscores the number 2 tight end for Pittsburgh? No, it's not crazy whatsoever. So I think that's a very good pivot as well if you're looking away from Darnell Washington in high-risk contests. So that'll do it for this video. Our daily plug, written by Bismo, will be up in a few hours. By the time you watch this video, it will probably be up. It'll be up early this afternoon. He'll give his own rankings. He'll give his lineup construction tips, his overall slate notes. May have some different thoughts than I do. He'll go more in depth than I do in this video. So make sure you go read that at occupyfantasy.com. Our Occupy model is already up and running. All the ownership I referenced in this video, that is in our Occupy model in our lineup builder. Plus, we have rankings for all players on DraftKings and FanDuel. If you want that extra edge, it's as low as $7 a week. So make sure you go check that out. Become a member of occupyfantasy.com. Join the community, and we'd love to have you in our Discord, which I talked about earlier as well. I'll put it on screen here. You'll see it pop up. Don't forget, an invaluable video, how to build winning NFL showdown lineups. So watch that next if you haven't already. Even if you have watched it, go ahead and get a refresher. It's about an hour long. Watch it on 2x speed. Maybe you missed some things. I rewatch it every couple of weeks, even though I created the video to make sure I don't miss anything. So for Occupy and Brian, thanks for listening. Good luck and enjoy tonight's Steelers and Bengals showdown slate.